Welcome back, comrades. This is Gaming with Austin. And today, we are on episode 53 of the Utopian. What we're gonna do this episode, the reason why, yeah. We already have enough food to feed all of us. So we don't have to compete as a species against one another for food. But the problem is unfair distribution causes that to happen. One of those things that is driving that into occurring is trade sanctions between countries. Like, to explain why animals multiply a lot more quickly when their lifespans are short, it's to ensure the survival of the species. There is a limit on carrying capacity of any biological entity. One thing that affects your metabolism as a species is the amount of surface area, your volume to surface area ratio. Animals with a greater surface area compared to volume have to tend to dissipate heat a lot more quickly. I believe that we should control our population growth. How? The reason parents tend to have... Eventually, the birth rate around the world would drop, to where the population would begin to decline, yet food would still be abundant. Because Japan's population is declining. Like, if human population is declining very quickly despite the fact that we have so much food, governments around the world would have to impose natalist policies. Like, they'd literally abolish birth control. Even information about birth control would be illegal. Not only that, they'd even abolish abortion too. If humans were the only species left on Earth other than dogs, dogs would probably adapt to a more herbivorous diet. You know, sometimes a population would stop growing even if there might be enough food for all of us. Even if there's more than enough food to ensure that the food supply remains stable. Because the amount of territory we need must cover food, water, and shelter. For an individual or a couple, like husband and wife, the amount of territory you need would be about 500 square feet. Like, if we start going towards overexploitation of plants, I know a solution to protecting our food supply. Use the power of nature. Like, instead of competing with other people, like in the state monopoly, the state would control the business. Like with the state, their profits would go towards buying land that is up for sale to build more farms to make more money. Like that's how state capitalism. State capitalism, it's basically like regular capitalism. You buy land, you grow crops, you sell crops, you make money, you buy more crops. It's basically a feedback loop, but when you don't have enough space for those excess crops, you buy even more land. In state capitalism, it works kind of like that, except instead of the individual doing it, it's the state that's doing the work. It is the state that is doing the work. This is how Norway does it. Not all people would have to eat like some people out there have to eat a lot just to survive. Like will the house of the ruler be like the palace? Will it be like the palace would be really huge to as a way to show off his social status. The reason it'd be super huge, he's doing it to show him whose boss it is. Who's boss at it. He's doing it to show him who's boss. In my economic theory, it's not about competition that would drive the prices down. It'd be about supply and demand. Like, we would take advantage of it by farm stacking. Like, one thing we need to do is evolve to have much smaller stomachs. Yet, still have the ability to digest plant materials. The reason? is that we would feel fuller a lot faster. You know, one of the plant-based foods that has calorie-dense nuts. How I describe the taste of peanut oil? I describe it as kind of nutty. In the fascist country, the government elites would be required by the dictator to show off their social status, which means they'd be required by law to have their housing requirements. They'd be required by law to live in a very big house. Ich habe zwei mehr Wochen. Like, I'd do the college thing to ensure, like, I would get an actual job. If I was to get paid $100,000, no, $40,000 or $100,000, I'd take the lower end. Because $100,000 a year is just overkill. That is just overkill. That is literally overkill. Sometime in the future, I'm gonna have to start learning how to make my own dishes you'll see in Chinese restaurants. The only problem I have with a pure monopoly, I'd rather go for a public monopoly, which it is publicly owned. Like, everybody would own a share of the monopoly. Like, my theory of communism, right now we're in a state of capitalism right now. Some countries are in socialism right now, too. Like social democracy. There is no constitutional reference to capitalism in America. In the fascist country in my story, with their constitution, it'd be there to maximize the power of the dictator. And all the shares would be allocated to the, like, of a company in the fascist country would be allocated to the government elite. While the dictator gets the most shares. Half of the shares of the companies would be allocated to the dictator. While the rest would go to the government elite. Capitalism is causing the fall of democracy. With the rise of fascism. Some of the proponents of, some of the neo-fascists actually have a strong support for capitalism. fascism is not entirely anti-capitalistic. In my model of my socio-economic theory, the first stage towards achieving true communism is to go from private capitalism to state capitalism, in which the state would start owning a huge share of the company. To where the state would make enough money to get out of debt. The proof that tax cuts will not work is when we initially instigated tax cuts back in the late 70s, like, the rich used to pay a fair share. They don't do it anymore, sadly. And Trump's tax cuts are only making the debt problem worse. His tax cuts for the rich, he imposed it for the benefit of himself. Directly for the benefit of himself. With the fascist dictator in my story, he would do it only for the benefit of himself. Not only that, he would start share scalping the companies. Similar to how ticket scalping is about, with ticket scalping, buy as many tickets as possible, then you sell them at a hike of the price. One methodology to fight capitalism is to fight ticket scalpers. Is to arrest every ticket scalper and focus on rehabilitating them. Because, you know, ticket scalpers make it... competition is no longer effective. It's only effective at price control on paper, but in practice, not so much. Will society be like in several hundred years? Like, communism cannot be truly achieved in a single day. It'll take several generations. I know this is going to be a painfully slow process. What motivates us into eating so much from the start? Like, whenever there's an overabundance of food, the reason people would have, like, animals would multiply, possibly to keep the, it's possible they would do it to keep the ecosystem balanced, because the problem with plant overabundance is the risks of oxygen toxicity for the animals. There is something called oxygen toxicity. Because if you stay in a hyperbaric chamber for too long, you're going to die from oxygen. Because, you know, oxygen, even though we need it to survive, it's also a poisonous element in large amounts. The problem with plants overpopulating is animals would probably suffer oxygen toxicity. That's the main problem. Too much oxygen is bad for you. And some people believe it's scientifically impossible to achieve communism. The resources that'll help plants grow are kind of scarce too. With mice, they're in a non-stop competition with humans over food. In order for species to all coexist at once, they need to have all, as a species, to have slightly different diets. Obligate carnivores have to compete with other obligate carnivores or omnivores for resources. For us humans, we are breeding animals to grow so large, like non-stop, because there is a demand for meat. Like seed dispersal, we have it pretty easy. What if plants were able to catapult their own seeds? One thing both animals and plants have to compete for is water. The problem with an overabundance of plants, what affects the carrying capacity of plants? Too much oxygen is bad for us. Even though we need it to survive, having too much is bad for you. Communism that has been achieved, true communism has only been achieved on a small scale. An example of such, in the form of quasi-communism, is Christiania in Denmark. Anyways, this is it for this video. Don't forget to leave a like if you like this video. Dislike if you disliked it. Subscribe for more. Share this with your comrades on social media. As always, thank you for watching, stay tuned for more, and peace out.